The night my wife came back like nothing had happened was the moment I realized my life wasn't falling apart by accident. It was being pushed off a cliff. My wife walked through the front door after being gone for 3 full days without a word. No calls, no texts, no explanation. Just 72 hours of complete silence, like she had vanished off the face of the earth. And then, there she was, acting like she had only stepped out to grab groceries. Lillian Brooks, I got up from the couch where I had been planted for the last 6 hours, just waiting and staring at the door. "Where have you been?" I asked because my head had been spinning. Non-stop, I needed space, she said. That was it. Just 3 words. Space. "You were gone for 3 days. I told her the kids kept asking where their mom was, and I filed a missing person report. I even called every hospital in the city trying to find you." She muttered that she was sorry and said she just needed time to think, but she wouldn't look at me. That was the first thing. That hit me. My wife, the woman who used to look straight into my eyes like she meant every word, now couldn't even raise her gaze off the floor like it had answers she didn't want to say out loud. "Think about what Lillian Brooks talked to me," I said, trying to keep it together because whatever was happening, we were supposed to face it as a team. That's how we always did things. But this time, she just said, "Not this time," and walked right past me. She went upstairs into our bedroom, shut the door, and I heard the lock click into place. I stood there in the living room of the house we had built together over 14 years, just listening to the silence while something cold started settling deep in my chest. Something wasn't right. Something was really wrong. A week later, I got served divorce papers. The guy handed them to me at my office like it was just another delivery. No emotion, no hesitation. Like he had done it 1,000 times before. He confirmed my name, Ethan Caldwell, and told me I had been served. Sat in my car, in the parking lot, and opened the envelope reading the words that were about to tear my life apart. Irreconcilable differences, dissolution of marriage, division of assets, custody arrangements, custody, Sophie Caldwell and Lucas Caldwell. My kids, 12 and 9. The reason I wake up every morning, the 2 people I would do anything to protect. And Lillian Brooks wanted to take them away from me. I drove home feeling like I was underwater and found her in the kitchen cooking dinner, like everything was normal, like she hadn't just blown up our entire life. "You're divorcing me." I said. She didn't even turn around, just kept stirring the pot with her back stiff and shoulders tight. "Yes," she answered. "Why?" I asked. "I told you, I need space. Space is taking a break, or sleeping in different rooms for a while." I said, "This is divorce. This is ending our family, and I deserve to know why." She said nothing. "Is there someone else?" I asked. More silence, and then she quietly said no. "Then what happened?" I asked. "What changed because I thought we were happy." She finally turned to face me, and her eyes were red like she had been crying, but her expression was shut down like a wall I couldn't get through. She asked me to just sign the papers and not make it harder than it already was. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're taking everything from me?" I said, "My wife, my home, my kids, and you won't even tell me why." She said she couldn't explain it, and just needed it to be over. I stood there looking at her. This woman I had loved for 14 years, built a life with raised kids with, and somehow she felt like a stranger. So I said fine. I went to the dining table, pulled out the papers, and signed every single page. Her face shifted for a second. Maybe surprise, maybe relief, maybe something else I couldn't read. She asked if I was really not going to fight it. I asked her if it would even matter. She didn't answer. That told me everything. I set the pen down and told her I'd have my lawyer review everything and send it back, but if this was truly what she wanted, I wouldn't stand in her way. Then I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and into the cool night air. But something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the divorce or how fast everything ended. It was something deeper, something I couldn't explain yet. Lillian Brooks had been distant before, stressed, distracted, dealing with things, but she had never been like this. Never cold, never closed off, never looking at me the way she just did, because what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger or resentment. It was fear. My wife was scared of something, and I was going to figure out what it was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was in the guest room since she made it clear she wanted me out of ours, just lying there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head: her disappearance, her return, her silence, the divorce papers, the way she avoided my eyes. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart, it was something else. Something bigger. I work in IT security. It's my job to find what people try to hide, to dig through data patterns and digital trails and expose the truth. I've spent 20 years learning how to spot when something doesn't add up and trust my instincts when they start going off. And right now, my instincts were screaming. At 2 in the morning, I got up and went into my home office. A few years back, I had installed a full security system, cameras at every entrance, motion sensors all through the house, and a control panel I could access from anywhere. There was one camera I had almost forgotten about, though the one in the home office I had turned off the live feed, because Lillian Brooks didn't like being recorded during her video calls, but I never removed it. It had been quietly recording to a backup drive this whole time. I pulled up the footage from the last couple weeks. At first it was nothing, just empty room clips and occasional shots of me working. Then I found it, March 15th at 2:47 in the afternoon, the day before she disappeared. A man walked into my office. I didn't recognize him. He was tall, dressed sharp, silver hair, and carried himself like a man used to power and money. He moved through my house like he owned it, like he belonged there. Lillian Brooks walked in behind him, and she looked terrified. I turned up the audio. He told her to sit down in a calm, controlled voice like he expected to be obeyed. She tried to talk, saying his name Dorian, but he cut her off and told her again to sit. So she did. He pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. I couldn't see what it was from the camera angle, but her reaction said everything. Her face went pale. Her hands flew to her mouth and she made a sound I had never heard from her before, something between a gasp and a sob. She begged him, saying no, and that he couldn't do this, but he told her he could do whatever he wanted and said he had been holding on to this for 15 years, just waiting for the right moment. She started pleading with him, saying she would do anything at all. He told her she would do it, and then he smiled in a way that made my skin crawl even through the screen. It was the coldest expression I had ever seen. Then he laid it out step by step, telling her she would disappear for a few days, and when she came back she would tell me she needed space, and after that she would file for divorce. She tried to push back, saying she couldn't do that and that I would never go along with it. But he cut her off and said I would follow along if she played her role the right way and made it clear she had no choice. Then he raised his phone again like a weapon and told her that if she didn't cooperate, I would see everything. The kids would see everything. Her job would see everything, and everyone she had ever known would be watching. She broke right there. Tears started pouring down her face as she begged him to stop and said she would do whatever he wanted as long as he didn't show me whatever was on that phone. He called her a good girl, like she was something he owned, and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then he warned her that he would be in touch with instructions and made it clear she was not to tell anyone. Not me, not a lawyer, not a single person, because if she did, he would release everything immediately. He made her confirm it twice until she finally whispered that she understood. Then he walked out, and she just sat there alone in my office, crying into her hands for a long time. I watched that footage 3 times in a row, trying to process what I was seeing. After that, I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer, Marlowe. "It's Callahan," I said, and told her we needed to talk right now. She sounded half asleep and reminded me it was 3 in the morning, but I told her this couldn't wait. When she asked what was going on, I told her straight up, we were not getting divorced, not yet, because I had just seen something that changed everything. By 5 in the morning, Dana Whitmore was at my house. She's the kind of lawyer who doesn't get surprised by much, sharp, focused, and experienced, and we had worked together before, so I trusted her completely. She told me to show her what I found, so I played the footage. She didn't say a word while it ran, but I could see her expression getting darker by the minute. When it ended, she leaned back and let out a slow breath and said, "My wife wasn't leaving because she wanted to. She said Lillian Brooks was being blackmailed. I told her yes by a man named Dorian and admitted I had no idea who he was yet, but I planned to find out. Marlowe nodded and said this changed everything, because if Lillian Brooks signed those papers under pressure, then the whole divorce could be thrown out. But I told her that wasn't what I was focused on. What mattered to me was that my wife had been carrying this alone, living in fear, trying to protect me and the kids from something she was ashamed of. I walked over to the window trying to keep my head straight and told her I needed to know what that man had on. What happened 15 years ago and how to stop him. She asked if I had talked to Lillian Brooks yet, and I said no, because I needed to understand the situation first and have a plan. Before I said anything, Marlowe agreed and pulled out her laptop saying we should start with what we knew. We had a name, Dorian, and a timeline of 15 years, which suggested whatever he had was probably recordings or photos. She pointed out that forcing Lillian Brooks into a divorce likely meant he was after money that she would get a settlement and then he would take it from her. But then she looked at me and said, this wasn't just blackmail. This was someone who had been planning for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I asked if we could find him, track him down. She said with the footage we had his face and she could run it through databases to see if anything came up. Then she looked at me seriously and said, I needed to tell my wife that I was on her side. I told her I would, but not yet, because right now Lillian Brooks was terrified of me seeing whatever that man was holding over her. If I pushed too soon, she might panic or run or do something desperate. Marlowe asked what my plan was. I sat down and stared at the paused frame on my screen. Dorian's face, frozen in that cold smile. I told her first, I would find out who he was. Then, I would find out what he had, and after that, I would figure out if there were other victims. Because a man like that doesn't stop at one person, and if he had been doing this for 15 years, then there were probably more women, more lives he had destroyed. Marlowe nodded and said, if we found them, we could build a case not just for Lillian Brooks, but for everyone he had hurt. I looked at her and said, this man thought he could tear my family apart and use my wife's past against her, but he was wrong. She asked what I needed from her, and I told her I wanted everything on the legal side, every law related to blackmail, extortion, and anything that could put him behind bars. She said she would handle it and reminded me to be careful because men like that don't go down easy, and things could turn dangerous if he found out I knew I told her to let him come, because I had spent my whole career dealing with people like him. Then I leaned back and, for a moment, my mind went somewhere else. Let me tell you about my wife. I met Lillian Brooks in the summer of 2009 when I was 30, and finally felt like my life was coming together after a promotion at work. She was 25, working in marketing and trying to rebuild herself after what she described as a rough few years. We met at a wedding through mutual friends. One of those warm summer nights where everything feels possible. She was standing by the dessert table looking a little out of place, so I walked up and made a joke about the cake being better than it looked. She smiled and asked if that was my professional opinion. I told her it was because I had a PhD in wedding desserts, and that made her laugh. And honestly, that was it for me. Right there. We ended up talking for 3 straight hours, missing most of the wedding, just standing off to the side, getting to know each other, like nothing else mattered. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, we got married. Early on, she told me she had a past. She wasn't proud of relationships that went wrong, bad decisions, and a time in her mid-20s when she felt lost. She never went into detail, and I never pushed her for it. Because everyone has a parts of their story they don't want to relive out loud. What mattered to me was the woman she had become. She was the kind of woman who was kind but tough at the same time and fiercely protective of the people she loved more than anything. She was an incredible mother, the kind who would go to the ends of the earth for Sophie Caldwell and Lucas Caldwell without hesitation. And she had always been right there beside me through everything. The hard times, the wins, the setbacks, never once backing away. We built 14 years together, 2 kids, a whole life, rooted in trust, respect, and that deep belief that we were stronger as a team than we ever could be apart. And that's when it finally hit me. She wasn't leaving because she stopped loving me. She was walking away to protect me, to protect our kids, to keep us from ever seeing whatever that man had over her. She was ready to lose everything, her marriage, her home, her family, just to shield us from the truth. That wasn't betrayal. That was love. Broken, desperate, painful love. And I wasn't going to let her carry that alone anymore. I was going to save her from it. It took me 3 days to figure out exactly who Victor Langford was. The footage gave me his face, and a reverse image search got me his name. From there, I dug into public records and started piecing together his life. 48 years old, former investment banker, now running some consulting firm that didn't seem to actually do anything. He had been married for over 2 decades to a woman. Named Isabella Cruz, owned 2 houses, one in the city and another out in the Hamptons, and lived like a man with serious money. But the numbers didn't make sense. His banking career had ended back in 2015, surrounded by rumors that never fully came to light, and since then his income had been all over the place. Yet his lifestyle never changed, which meant one thing: he was getting his money from somewhere else. So I kept digging: court records, civil cases, restraining orders, and then I found it. Back in 2018, a woman named Teresa Colvin had filed a complaint against him for harassment and extortion. The case never made it to trial and was dropped without any explanation. Then, in 2020, another woman. Olivia Bennett had gotten a temporary restraining order against him. It expired after 6 months, and she never renewed it. In 2022, a third woman. Vanessa Cole had filed for divorce just weeks after meeting him at a charity event. That divorce wrapped up unusually fast. And large amounts of money were quietly paid to a so-called consultant. At that point, it wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a pattern. Victor Langford had been doing this for years, finding women with secrets waiting until they had something to lose, and then using that leverage to bleed them dry through forced divorces. Lillian Brooks wasn't the first, and she probably wasn't going to be the last. I reached out to Teresa first. She was hesitant, which I understood because I was just some stranger calling her and asking her to revisit the worst chapter of her life. But when I explained everything, when I told her about Lillian Brooks and showed her what I had found, she agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a small coffee shop, both of us tied together by the same man. She told me that years ago, when she was 23, they had a short relationship, and she had no idea he was married. He made it seem casual, nothing serious. What she didn't know was that he had secretly documented their interactions. Years later, after she had built a life, gotten married, had kids, he showed up again and threatened to expose that information to her husband if she didn't pay him. The first payment was $50,000, then another, then another. By the time she realized it would never stop, she had given him nearly $200,000. I asked her why she dropped the complaint. She told me, because he said he would release everything anyway. If she went to court and make sure everyone saw it, her husband, her kids, her job, she said she couldn't let her children see that. Her voice cracked when she told me it destroyed her marriage anyway because her husband found out about the payments and assumed the worst. They divorced 2 years later. She looked at me and said, that man took everything from her money, her marriage, her peace, and there was nothing she could do back then. But now there was. I told her about the footage, about the other women I had started to find, and about building a case strong. Enough to put him away for good. Then I asked her if she would testify. She stayed quiet for a while, thinking it over. Then she said yes, not just for herself, but for every woman he had hurt, and for my wife. Over the next 2 weeks, I found more of them. Olivia Bennett, Vanessa Cole, Megan, Pierce, Laura Simmons. Each one had the same story, a past connection with him, sometimes small, sometimes serious, that he secretly recorded. Then, years later, he came back with threats, demands, and destruction. Some paid him huge amounts of money. Others lost their families, their careers, their reputation. One of them, Patricia, had reached a breaking point emotionally and struggled deeply when it became too much. She survived, barely, and still agreed to testify. I gathered everything. The footage, the statements, the payment trails, all of it showing a pattern that stretched back over a decade. Then I took it to the police detective Finnegan. Daniel Mercer handled major crimes and had the kind of look that told you he had seen the worst of people. He went through everything in silence, turning pages one by one, his expression getting heavier. Finally, he said this had been going on for years and that a lot of people had been hurt. He asked if my wife was one of them. I told him yes, but she didn't know. I knew. Yet I explained I wanted to build the case first, so there would be no way for that man to escape. He nodded and said they would need official statements from all the women, but based on what I brought in, they already had enough to make an arrest. I asked him. When he said soon, just a matter of coordinating with the district attorney and making sure everything was airtight. Then he looked at me and told me I should talk to my wife, because she needed to know she wasn't alone anymore. I told him I would do it. That same night, he stood up, shook my hand, and said I had done good work, and that a lot of people were going to get justice because of it. But honestly, there was only one person I cared about, and now it was time to go take care of her. I found Lillian Brooks sitting out back in the yard. The kids were gone for the night because I had asked my mother, Margaret Hayes, to take them so I could finally have time alone with my wife. She didn't question me at all, just hugged me tight and said she would pray for us. Lillian Brooks was sitting on the bench by the garden, the one we built together the summer after Sophie Caldwell was born. She looked so small in the dim evening light. Shoulders hunched, head turned away from the house like she didn't belong there anymore. I walked over and sat down beside her. She stiffened when I got close but didn't move away. She said she thought I was staying at my brother's place that night. I told her I changed my mind. She started to say we shouldn't do this and brought up the divorce. I told her there wasn't going to be a divorce. That made her turn toward me. Her eyes were swollen red like she had been crying again, and I knew she hadn't really stopped since all this began. He asked me what I was talking about. So I pulled out my phone, opened the footage, and hit play. The moment she saw it, her face lost all color. She asked how I found it. I told her about the office camera. The one we both forgot was still recording. Then I paused the video and looked at her. I told her I knew everything about Dorian, about the threats, about the recordings. All of it. Her whole body started shaking as tears ran down her face, and she apologized over and over, saying she never wanted me to see any of it. She said she was only trying to protect me. I told her I already knew that. She tried to explain that it all happened 15 years ago before she even met me when she was young, and didn't know he was married or that he was recording anything I told her. I understood. She said she should have told me back when we first got serious, but she was ashamed and thought it was over and never imagined it would come back like this. I took her hands and told her to stop. And she did. I told her I didn't care about those recordings or what she did back then. What mattered to me was her and our family, and I wasn't going to let anyone destroy what we built. She panicked and said, what if he released everything I told her? He wasn't going to. Not anymore. I turned her to face me fully and explained that I had found other women, 5 of them who went through the same thing. I told her we built a case with evidence statements, everything, and that the police were already preparing to arrest him. She looked at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I told her it was over and he couldn't hurt her anymore, or anyone else. She worried about the recordings again, but I explained they were evidence of a crime since they were made without her consent, and they would never be released. She broke down, crying harder than before, but this time there was something else in her face. Not just fear anymore. There was hope, weak and fragile, but real. She asked if I really did all that for her. I told her of course I did, because she was my wife and the mother of my kids, and there was no way I was letting someone like that tear us apart. She admitted she thought I would hate her once I saw everything. That hit me hard. I pulled her close and held her tight. I told her what I saw wasn't something to hate. I saw my wife being terrorized by a man who had controlled her for years. I saw someone who loved her family so much she was ready to give up everything just to keep them safe. She said she was trying to protect me from the truth. I told her I didn't need protection from the truth. I needed her, the real version of her. With all the scars and everything she carried, I lifted her face so she had to look at me. I told her I married her, not some perfect version, but the real woman standing in front of me, and that I loved her exactly as she was. Nothing was going to change that. She collapsed into me crying. But for the first time, those tears weren't from fear. They were relief. 3 days later, Victor Langford was arrested. They picked him up at his country club, which I later heard was intentional to make it as humiliating as possible. He was charged with extortion, blackmail, and multiple counts of collecting private information about women without their consent. The case was solid. One by one, the victims took the stand and told their stories. Teresa, Colvin, Olivia Bennett, Vanessa, Cole, Megan, Pierce, Laura Simmons, and, finally, Lillian Brooks. My wife walked into that courtroom with her head held high and told the truth about everything. She talked about their brief past, about the recordings she never knew existed, about the fear and shame and the impossible situation he forced her into. And she didn't break. She was strong. Dorian's lawyers tried to twist it, all make it seem like the women were just angry or looking for revenge, but no one believed it. Not with so many stories lining up perfectly. Not with the footage showing him threatening Lillian Brooks in our own house. Not with years of financial records. Proving what he had done. The jury found him guilty on every single charge. He got 18 years in federal prison. When the verdict was read, he turned and looked at me, his face full of anger, like he finally lost control. He mouthed that it wasn't over. I looked right back at him and told him without saying a word that it was. But there was one more thing none of us expected. During the investigation, they talked to his wife, Isabella Cruz. She had been married to him for 22 years. Turns out she knew everything, not because she was helping him, but because she was trapped just like the rest of them. He had done the same thing to her when they first met, used recordings to control her and keep her from ever leaving. She had been stuck with him for decades, too scared and ashamed to ask for help. When the police came for him, she finally broke and told them everything. Every woman, every payment, every life he ruined. Her testimony sealed the case completely, and when it was all over, she filed for divorce, a real one this time, the kind that finally set her free. After the trial, Lillian Brooks met with her. She didn't tell me what they talked about, but when she came home, her eyes were full of tears. She said that after all those years that woman finally saved herself. I told her they both did. But she shook her head and looked at me. She said I was the one who saved her, because she had been ready to walk away from everything, from me, from the kids, from our life. And I didn't let her. I told her I couldn't, because I loved her too much. Then she kissed me. The first real kiss since all of this started. It tasted like tears, relief, and something new beginning. She told me she loved me, and that she always had, even when she was trying to leave, especially then. 2 years have passed since that night in the backyard. I'm 47 now, still living in the same house, but it feels different. Somehow. Lighter. Like a weight we didn't even notice before has finally been lifted. Lillian Brooks is 42, and after the trial, she started going to therapy, working through not just the blackmail, but all the shame she'd been carrying for 15 years. She tells me it hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it, because she's finally learning how to forgive herself for the choices she made when she was younger, and accept that her past doesn't get to decide her future. Sophie Caldwell is 14 now, dealing with high school, the same way her mom deals with everything head-on. Strong and determined, Lucas Caldwell is 11, and right now his whole world is video games, basketball, and the dog. We finally got him last Christmas. We told the kids a version of the truth that made sense for their age. Not everything, but enough so they could understand why their mom was struggling and why things feel different. Now, Sophie Caldwell asked me if I saved her mom after we explained everything I told her. We saved each other, and that seemed to be enough for her. Sometimes, late at night, I sit there and think about how things could have gone if I hadn't checked that camera. If I had just accepted the divorce, signed the papers, and walked away thinking my wife stopped loving me, everything would have fallen apart. She would have lost the house, the money, and time with the kids, and he would have taken whatever he wanted from her, leaving her with nothing. She would have been alone, broken, carrying that shame for the rest of her life. And I would have spent years wondering what I did wrong, and why the woman I loved suddenly turned into someone I didn't recognize. But I didn't walk away, because something didn't feel right, because 14 years of marriage taught me to trust that feeling and look deeper when things don't make sense on the surface, because I loved her too much to settle for an easy answer. And I guess that's the real lesson here. When someone you love starts acting different, don't jump to conclusions and don't settle for the simplest explanation. Look deeper, ask questions, and don't give up on them too quickly, because sometimes the people pushing you away are actually trying to protect you, and sometimes the only way to save them is to hold on tighter. Last summer, Lillian Brooks and I renewed our vows. We kept it small. Just family and close friends in the backyard, right by that same bench where everything changed for us. Sophie Caldwell insisted on being the flower girl, even though she's technically too old now. Lucas Caldwell handled the rings. My brother Ryan Caldwell stood beside me again, just like he did all those years ago. I told Lillian Brooks I was taking her as my wife again, and she laughed through tears, asking if that was part of the official vows. I told her it is now. I slid a new ring onto her finger, one we picked out together this time, a symbol of the life we're building now, not the one we almost lost. I told her I always knew she had a past she wasn't proud of, and I never needed the details because knowing her was enough. She squeezed my hands while I spoke, and I told her now. Know everything, every scar, every secret, and somehow I love her even more than I did on our first wedding day, because now I've seen what she's willing to sacrifice for the people she loves. I've seen her strength, her courage, her determination to protect this family. I wiped a tear from her cheek and told her I was choosing all of her past, present, and whatever future we build together. No more secrets, no more shame, just us. She kissed me before I could even finish. Everyone started clapping. The kids were cheering. My mom was crying, and my brother had the biggest grin on his face. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly home. So that's my story. I know it probably didn't go the way you expected. When a wife disappears for 3 days, comes back asking for space, and files for divorce, most people assume betrayal. Most people feel anger, but sometimes the obvious answer is wrong. My wife wasn't leaving because she didn't love me. She was leaving because she loved me too much. Too much. To let me see the shame she carried. Too much to watch my face when I found out the truth. She was trying to protect me by pushing me away, and I almost let her go. But something inside me said it wasn't right, so I trusted that feeling. I checked a camera I forgot about, and that's when I saw the truth. My wife wasn't the problem. She was a victim, trapped by someone who had been waiting years to use her past against her. When I told my lawyer we weren't getting divorced yet, it wasn't because I was giving up. It was because I finally understood what was really happening, and I wasn't going to let it destroy us. Now, let me ask you something. What would you do if you found out your partner wasn't betraying you, but being blackmailed? Would you fight for them, even if it meant facing secrets they were ashamed of? Would you risk everything to save something that looked like it was already over? Have you ever judged someone without knowing the full story? Think about that. It's Sunday morning now. Lillian. Brooks is still asleep, and the house is quiet. Lucas Caldwell is at a sleepover, and Sophie Caldwell is probably texting her friends from her room. I'm sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee watching the sun come up, thinking about everything we went through. My wife disappeared for 3 days. She came back and asked for a divorce. I signed the papers without a fight, but something didn't feel right, so I checked that camera. And what I saw changed everything. Not because it showed me her secrets, but because it showed me her fear. And that's when I understood she wasn't running from me. She was trying to protect me. So I chose to protect her instead. That's what marriage really is to me. Not the easy days or the perfect moments. It's what you do when everything is falling apart. It's choosing to fight when it would be easier to walk away. Choosing to look deeper instead of accepting the obvious. Choosing to love someone fully scars secrets, and all I made that choice 2 years ago, and I'll keep making it every single day from here on out.